And as I thought about this morning, as I thought about this new innovation around content, around the future of marketing, I thought, who better to bring onto the stage than my good friend Abe Thomas, Vice President and General Manager of Microsoft.com, where they've pioneered a whole new user experience that's fantastic on the desktop, on the mobile device, on the tablets. It's an incredible new innovation. So please join me in welcoming Abe Thomas, Vice President and General Manager of Microsoft.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Lemuel. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think the two of them practiced this at all beforehand. I don't know, that was totally random, wasn't it? First of all, I want to thank Jim and the rest of the Bright Edge team for inviting me to this event. I think it's an absolute honor. I'm truly flattered that Jim thought about me and being up here in stage and sort of kicking things off. I've known Jim for, I was thinking about this in my cab ride here last night. I've known Jim for more than 5 years now. And when he was talking about how he's been going up and down the valley around that time, one of the doors he knocked on was the MySpace door. And Ken Yamada and I and Ken's in the audience as well, we were, and this is back in the day when Bright Edge was known as Scout Metrics, for those of you who remember that. But Ken was like, hey, we should talk to these guys. I think there's maybe something there. And I was like, they're really small. It was really just Jim and Lemuel, and I think Albert had just joined or was about to join or something like that. It was just I wasn't too intrigued or interested. And my job at MySpace was I was managing online marketing. And you can imagine back then we were having a hard time. We were going up against Facebook, and we just had a hard time trying to bring traffic to the site. So it's really, really important for me to work with a really established sort of an SEO vendor who I know would bring in traffic to the site. But it's as I look back at those discussions that I had with Jim, and Jim back then, even though he was very energetic this morning, as you can tell, back then he was a man of few words. Let's just put it that way. He was, to be fair to him, he was, the company was in stealth mode. He was still trying to get it up and running. He knew I was also talking to a competitor of his, so he was very careful in what he shared about what the company could do and couldn't do. But at the end of the day, there are very few calls like this that I've made in my lifetime. But you just look across the room and you just look the guy in the eye and just say, I think I'm going to go with this. And that's exactly what I did. I'm very, very happy with the relationship with Jim. The time at MySpace, and obviously when I moved over to Microsoft, I didn't think twice about who to bring on board as our SEO partner there. So thank you again, Jim, and it's amazing the kind of success that you've had over the years. So why don't we move on to earned media, which is really the topic or the theme of this conference. So just by context, I manage, what I do is I manage Microsoft.com. There's a set of owned properties there that I actively manage, have responsibility for things around product management, design, SEO, obviously, and the international subsidiaries are also, for those owned properties, also fall within my domain. And earned media is increasingly becoming a important topic for us as a company at Microsoft. And one of the things that, is happening, and this is stating the obvious, obviously, but Facebook is just amazing, right? It's just grown so much, and it's almost synonymous with earned media now. If you look at this graph, for example, when you just where brands are spending all their money, more than half of their budget is going towards Facebook. And not that the other ones are not important, it's just they're all growing, but Facebook is without a doubt. And you know this from the work that you do on your campaigns as well. And when you look at, this is another poll that was done, when you look at how important it is, and the question was, how important is a trend towards earned media via social media marketing in terms of the impact of the organization. And you'll see that quite significant has just gone up quite a bit in the last few years, and the not significant has come down. So social media, earned media is really becoming very, very important for brands. And then what within social media is most important? Facebook likes, this is just a ranking from 0 to 3. And when the poll was done, the question was, which do you think is the most important metric that you manage? And Facebook likes and Facebook fans was the two most important things, which is just supporting or complementing the point that I made earlier around how important Facebook is. And the average spend of Facebook fans versus non-fans for the really important brands out there is just, you can just tell. You see the darker bars here versus the not so dark bars, the gray bars. You'll see that they just on average spend a lot more, the Facebook fans do, and so it's really important to invest in that medium. So here's the other thing that's happening though. You're just seeing a lot of blurring happening between paid, owned, and earned. And this has been going on, I would say, in the early years of social media. I don't think this was happening quite clearly, but now it's very, very clear to me that this is happening. In the old model, you had a site, you had a website, you owned that content, and everything else needed to converge to that. It was just a very carefully orchestrated model. But that's really a fairly old model. Now what's happening is you're just seeing a lot more merging of the three. And between owned and earned, you just got this shared content. You've got sponsored content between earned and paid, and you've just got partnerships that are happening between owned and paid as well. So there's this famous. I don't know if you guys know John. I want to say Wanamaker. I think that's his name. Yeah. He was one of the fathers of modern advertising. He lived in the early 19th century, and one of the statements he's made, which has been popularized over time, has been the statement around half of the advertising that I do or that we do works. The problem is I don't know which half. So and that was before any kind of social media, even paid media. And you can imagine what the problem is today. We all invest in all of these channels, but we often don't know which one's truly working. Which is why it's important to have tools like the ones that Jim is alluding to and talking about. I mean, it's really important to have those kinds of tools to understand what's really driving the impact. Is it the earned media? But when you have this kind of overlapping happening, it becomes really, really hard. So you look at, and then you have situations where you have brands that are not just online but are also offline. It becomes really hard to know there as well. Like, what drove the sale of that latte? Was it because of somebody who saw a deal online that Starbucks had kind of notified its users about it, its followers about it, and said, hey, we've got this 50% off thing happening, or was it something else? It's really hard to really know that. You've got a brand that's invested in you've got a little bit of owned, earned, and paid happening here. You've got fans of Facebook that are following, and they're actually kind of contributing and making it more viral and letting all of their friends and peers know about the various things that the brands are doing. But it's really, really hard to know what's driving the sale. And Jim shared a similar slide. It's just increasingly about the people that you know. It's just standing out. Remember back in the day when online banner ads were hot? And think about where they are now. Think about how there's banner blindness that's just killed us. I mean, there's still a huge multi-billion-dollar business happening around CPM ads. Don't get me wrong. But it's just increasingly what you're seeing is people who you know and who are strong advocates of a certain brand or a product. That's who you increasingly are relying on for purchase of that product. So with paid media, you always get what you pay for, right? I mean, I did a lot of SCM marketing when I was at eBay many years ago, and it was so clear. You put in 100K, you get 100K worth of value coming out of it. It's kind of like when you're out on the sea. You have a paddle boat out, you'll only go so fast. If you have a speedboat out, you will go much faster. So with paid media, it's a lot more predictable. But with earned media, you just get a lot more volatility. You just don't know often how viral things go, and there's goodness that comes with it, but there's also downsides that happen when you can't actually control the messaging with earned media. So I know that I have some peers and colleagues of mine from Gap here, and I don't mean to pick on you guys. Microsoft itself has had many missteps on this, and I could have used us as an example as well. But this was during Hurricane Sandy, and you can tell from the way the tweet was done, it was really a very, very, hey, we know Sandy's out there, but hey, you should shop online, which was really an example of how things can really go bad if you don't control the messaging around with your customers. And you had people who were just really annoyed about that. They were like, "What are you doing? I mean, there's a serious natural calamity out there, and people are suffering, and you're losing lives, and this is how you take advantage of the situation. That's not quite right." Now, Gap did apologize or have a mini apology, but in many ways the damage was sort of done. All of the years of building a really strong brand can get tarnished like this in a matter of seconds, and so you've got to be really, really, really careful about what you do. This is another example with American Apparel. They, during Sandy again, 20% off everything for the next 24 hours in case you're bored during the storm. Can you imagine that? And oh, check it out, at the bottom right, they actually have a coupon code for when you check out. It's called Sandy Store. It's just. I mean, you can just imagine. I mean, I didn't. When I found this example, I was trying to figure out if I couldn't find all the history and see what people were saying about it, but you can just imagine. I mean, people must have been just absolutely flabbergasted when they saw this. So it's really important that the messaging, the communications that happens with earned media is just really well orchestrated. A really good example of a brand that did this really well was Nabisco. Everybody watched the Super Bowl. Everybody saw the Oreo ad. What a beautiful example of something that they did not know that the lights were going to go out in that stadium. They did not know that. And they had people at a command center sitting there in the event of something like this happening. And they actually just got it all together and quickly came out with that ad which said, you can still dunk in the dark or something like that. And it was just the most beautiful thing. It got retweeted many times, thousands of times. They got lots of followers. They got this, amazing press that happened almost near overnight, actually within hours. And it was just brilliantly done. I mean, think about all of the money that they could have spent on TV ads trying to sort of build that kind of brand. But here, the brand value just increased exponentially, just very, very quickly. So just super, super important to be careful. And sometimes a lot of people think of earned media as just an afterthought. It's an afterthought because, hey, paid media is where all the energies are. That's how budgets often get assigned. It's, hey, what are we doing with Google? How much are we spending there? And we've got to focus on that. And what happens is when a campaign launches, when a new product launch happens, the paid media or the earned media piece comes in after. But if you're really thoughtful and strategic about it, you really can get ahead of the curve and actually have them both work in tandem. So you get the 1 + 1 = 3 type synergy. Okay, now let me just focus a little bit of my attention on sort of earned media issues that plague large companies. In my time, I've actually been in small startups, from 15, 20 people, all the way to a company the size of Microsoft, which is about 95,000 people. And when I was coming up with this slide, I was trying to figure out this is actually, believe it or not a big problem actually, this is a big problem definitely for the large companies, but it actually has the potential of being a problem even for smaller companies if you're not careful in how you manage it. So first and foremost, within a large company, you have lots of people. At Microsoft, we have about 2,000, 2,500 marketers in that 95,000 company. Imagine. And lots of them have some, not all of them obviously, but some of them have social media responsibilities. But it's often not clear. They're all often sitting in one business group, and do they talk a lot to each other? No. So their roles are not clear. The level of expertise, of knowledge, is sort of all over the place. You have some who are novices in the social media space, or the earned media space, and then some who are experts. And so, but the roles and responsibilities are not clear at all, and that's one big issue. Social content management, boy, you hit it on the mark, Jim, with what you were saying. I mean, this is, I'm not sure I was aware of the fact that 90% of all the content out there has been created in the last 2 years, but boy, we sure experienced it at Microsoft. I mean, there's so much content that gets created all the time. Layer in social content, some of which is super engaging, some is not, but we don't manage that content extremely well. And I bet you this is a huge, huge, huge problem that is that all big companies go through. Anytime you have multiple groups that are creating content and they have different varying levels of expertise around this, you'll be plagued by this problem for sure. Tools and services. Everybody thinks that they have the right tool. One business group would be like, yep, we've been talking to Sprinklr another one, Radian 6, another one, Gestalt, another one, you just name it. All of these listening tools, and oh, by the way, if you're working with a certain agency, they have their sort of partner or tool that they use, and they bring that in and convince the client that that should be the one that be used. But guess what? You only have one customer. You only have, they only want to hear from you through one voice. If you have all of these various tools out there, you're just coming across as being super clumsy. And so standardizing across tools and services, super important. Measurement. It's always, always, always tempting to have your KPI for your campaigns be the easiest thing that you can measure, right? I mean, oh, the Facebook likes or the fans or you name it, but how does that really drive conversion? How much time and effort do you spend trying to connect the two and figure out, like, hey, that's great that we have all of this, fan following and what have you in our media, but how did that really help? Or in some ways, did that actually hurt? Are you on top of that? And so the KPIs and standardizing across KPIs, so some business groups will go through the rigorous process of making sure they've got the key set of KPIs. Other ones will just go after the ones that are easier to track. And a third one would be, hey, they'll just rely on the agency that they have to advise them on that one topic. And then, of course, coordination, right? I mean, none of this really happens. You don't have a proper governance model in large companies that allow you to just have all of these individuals and groups talk to each other and make sure that there's some best practice sharing that's happening. But this last point, in many ways, is almost like all of those four other ones have to be attended to really, really well for you to really tackle this one. But these are 5 huge issues that I found really plague us. And what does this all lead to? It leads to a tremendous amount of fragmentation within the company itself. You just have all these siloed pieces of work that are happening. Lots of duplication of effort. Think about all the best practices that one BG or business group would have learned over time. Does that get shared? Does that not? If it didn't get shared, the same business group probably went through a similar year of learning. We could have totally avoided that if we were doing a lot of sharing. So duplication of effort. And oh, by the way, so much money gets spent, right? I mean, because everybody's just learning at different paces and it's not coordinated. Inconsistencies. We talked about how you rely heavily on what your friends say about when you buy a product, and think about if you're buying let's say a Windows product versus an Office product, we're talking and engaging with our customers and our users in a different way. You just are going to end up with just a very inconsistent experience. And then just inefficiencies, right? I mean, we talked about this a little bit with the duplication of effort. Duplication of effort automatically creates inefficiencies because you're just spending more money and you're just being extremely inefficient about it. So I bring this up, and like I said, I mean, this may seem like a large company problem, but the only one piece of advice I have for you, for the brands that are in the room, even for the agencies that are in the room, is don't let it get to this. You actually have the opportunity to create enough discipline in the process to actually address this in the early days of a company's growth as opposed to much later. The problem that big companies now have is unlearning all the bad behavior. And trust me, when you're my age, it's really hard to unlearn and then relearn again. So it's really important that you nip this in the bud, get to it before a company gets too large, before the different business groups kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger. So, Altimeter came out with this very, very interesting stages of social maturity, which I found very intriguing. And, it's pretty descriptive, as you can see. I mean, there's a whole sort of planning where you just listen and learn. You just want to know what's happening. What are your users saying about you on these social media channels, and how are they interacting with you? Presence is a little bit of a step up, where you actually let them know as to how what your thoughts are. You're starting to engage. And then engagement is when you're really deepening that relationship. You're actually doing a lot more. You're being very thoughtful. You're not just blasting them with some posts every day and letting them know, hey, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. You're just being very, very thoughtful about, no, I'm not going to hit you up today. I'm just going to be more surgical about when to reach out to my fan base. Formalize is when you actually a company puts a program against it. You have resources against it. You actually are organizing a lot more for scale. And strategic is when you think ahead. It's a little bit, and this is the Oreo Nabisco example, right? They thought ahead. They knew that there was a Super Bowl happening. They knew that they wanted to have a staff at hand to actually make some calls right then and there in the event something were to happen. Did they know that they were going to have the lights go out in the stadium? No, but they were ready. They were ready for a lot of this. So that's being super strategic, and convergence is this sort of nirvana, right? Where you kind of have it all together. You operate like a machine, and you know exactly what to do, when to do it. And this is really, really tough. I can't think of any company out there that's kind of nailed this at that level. So, and I would say, it's sometimes the bigger the company, the more of an excuse we have for not being in the converged state. But we often have the resources. The budget's often not the issue. We just have to have the discipline. It's all about the process and the discipline to get it all together. This is something else that Altimeter came out with, which is they surveyed a bunch of companies, and I believe what they said was about 11% of all the companies take a very, very decentralized approach to earned media. It's just everybody does their own, and some of that stuff surfaces up, and some of it doesn't, but it's fairly decentralized. Here you have about 30%, and then you also have about 30% of the companies out there that take a little bit more of a centralized approach, where you have a corporate communications group that perhaps manages all of the social media that happens within the group. So it's a little bit more organized. This is a little bit of a hub and spoke. 40% of the companies out there do that, where you give a little bit of autonomy to the different spokes, but you're kind of, you're sort of managing it centrally. And then this is, and I'll talk about this a little bit as to what Microsoft is thinking of doing, but this is a little bit of a multiple hub and spoke or a dandelion kind of thing, where you've got one single thing, but you've got different groups that also have a little bit of autonomy in how they want to do their earned media. And then you've got, not surprisingly, a very small percentage of people doing this, which is called a holistic approach, which is everybody is just operating in the same level of maturity. They know what to do. You don't have to go seek guidance from a central entity. You just know what to do when a situation happens. This, I just don't know who does this. I can't imagine. It's got to be this three-man company because you just look across the room and say, hey, you got it, or I got it, or whatever it is, and that's how you do it. But it's just insane how, but it requires a tremendous amount of maturity to get to that point. One of the, and this is a little bit of the model that I think we at Microsoft are definitely investigating, is this multiple hub and spoke or dandelion type model. And why? Because we have multiple audiences. You think about it, we have a consumer audience, which is a really important focus for us, a SMB audience, a public sector audience, and then you have products. You've got Windows, Office, all these different groups. So all of these things intersect. So you have to give them a little bit of autonomy on doing something, but it has to be managed through a central operations team. And that's what that first graphic is. And then when you put that globally, many of these hub and spokes become one single circle. And then you have to manage that at corp as well. And then that's where you end up with the third graphic, which is each country does its own thing, but it's still sort of centrally coordinated. This is so hard to do. This is really, really hard to manage. But it's totally worth it because, like I mentioned earlier, one misstep and the years and years of you building a strong brand can just go away right away. All right, well, that's all I had. I want to thank Jim again and the rest of the BrightEdge team for inviting me. This is going to be an outstanding conference. I'm very, very happy for the progress that everybody's made. I've got people in my team here as well who are going to be here for the next couple of days so they can talk a little bit about what we're doing on SEO and earned media. Thank you.
Everybody will be dancing.